The topics and opinions expressed in the following show are solely those of the hosts and their guests and not those of W4CY Radio, its employees, or affiliates. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to W4CY Radio or its employees or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4CY Radio.
Welcome back, everyone, to the Geeks, Geezers, and Googleization Show, the home of Googleization Nation, where we talk with HR and business thought leaders about the crazy shift going on in the world of business, technology, and HR. Here's your host, Ira Wolf.
Hey, welcome back, everyone, to the Geeks, Geezers, and Googleization Show, and for everyone in Googleization Nation. Hope you're doing well, you're safe. We're still kind of figuring out, well, I think we know who our president's going to be, but we're still dealing with certainly a lot of unrest.
Can you believe it's a week? It's a week already that we did this. Last week we were here, we were thinking, well, we don't know where we're going to be the day after the election, and here we still are.
Yeah, no, and last week we actually didn't know, based on where we were at that point, we thought the result was going to be a little bit different, but still a lot of uncertainty. So we're still living in our VUCA world, volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. I just actually coined this. I looked up before I came up with this VUCA-itis. Yesterday I was feeling a little bit that way, a million things going on. And somebody else actually wrote about it about 6 years ago. But so there you have it. A lot of things going on. We got some great guests today. We're going to be talking with Deb Fortin and John Gregory Vincent. They are authors of two books. One is The Submarine Way, which is the focus of today's conversation. We're going to be talking about inclusion and leadership. They have a really, really interesting system. In fact, patent pending. So I want to find out about that and a great background and what kind of an important topic. I know we've been addressing that several times over the last few months. And we're going to continue on that conversation today. And we're going to continue it next week. And we got a super special guest next week. So you'll have to stay tuned to find out who that is. I did a little updating over the weekend. I think it was this weekend. Everything runs together. As my friend, one of my friends says, it's Blur's Day.
Blur's Day.
Yeah. Jason Averbook. Too many names going through my head. Jason Averbook came up with that pretty early on in the pandemic, and it was sort of like every day runs together. And so we've got Blur's Day going on. But I updated the origins of my book, which ended up being the TED Talk and then became Recruiting in the Age of Googleization. Original title, Mike, as you know, was When the Shift Hits Your Plan. And it was a book about stats. I updated it with a couple new things, updated my video. You can get to that just by going to whentheshifthitsyourplan.com. It is available as a free download. And one of the facts that's in there, Mike, you might have seen me say this, or if people listen to my podcast before, you might have heard this. Basically Amazon, when we talk about change, how fast things are changing, especially in the HR world, Amazon updates their software, their algorithm, about every 11 seconds. So every time you go up there, they're looking at the data, they're making changes. And when I say that, I mean, it's not a complete makeover, but they're adjusting that response. So when you go up, when you do a search and you want to buy a product and you look for something, and then magically appears, hey, other people like you purchased this.
Right.
Go, how did they know that I wanted that? And if enough people click on it, they continue it. If nobody clicks on it, they go, just an anomaly, and they remove it. So they're always doing those updates. And again, I use that figure because that stat, because it really indicates how fast the world is changing. But the other part is that probably in the time, which was maybe about 60 seconds that I was explaining that, Jeff Bezos made $244,000. So again,
I helped contribute to a little small portion of that just 30 minutes ago.
Yeah, me too. So again, the book is filled with stats like that, but more importantly, just put it into some relevance of how our world is changing. And one of those areas happens to be along diversity and inclusion and so forth. But before we get there, Mike, anything new in your world? We sort of jumped into this.
Well, nothing particularly new, but it's interesting that you mentioned the algorithm being adjusted, and it reminds me of Netflix. Once it starts to figure out what you like, it makes recommendations. And to bring it back to our world, that's basically a different application of factor analysis that's used in personality assessments. Certain clusters of behaviors, traits, preferences tend to cluster together. And that's how Amazon and Netflix or any of the streaming services, that's how they get to learn who you are, because if you like X, you may like Y that's very similar. And these systems are just getting tighter and tighter at being able to put information in front of you that you are going to like and want, as opposed to stuff that you're going to click away from. Pretty fascinating.
And that's a great point. And it basically is back, people look at, assessments sometimes as this crystal ball and this magic. And,
right.
And the reality is it's at a point now where they're driven by data. I mean, There's so much data in there. This isn't a psychologist that came up with 20 questions and put it out there and he interprets it. With software, I won't say it's AI, but with certainly predictive software out there, it's very, very accurate. And there's millions and millions of data points that are there. There's millions of people that in the systems that you and I use and recommend, they are out there and they're highly predictive. So great point. And what we're moving toward is, certainly leadership, inclusion, diversity. Hopefully, we're going to get to the point where software is going to be able to help us, not make those decisions, but help us identify where are inequities. How can we make that better? But in the meantime, we don't have that. What we do have is our guests today. And they've come up with a way, and again, maybe in some of the background, they'll share with us that it's very, very predictive in their process. I also, I'm pretty impressed that they have a patent pending. It's patent pending. Their process is patent pending, and they're working a lot with police forces, universities, communities, not only businesses, and certainly that's pretty high up on the list as far as police departments and what's going to go on there. In fact, in the graduate program that I'm teaching, that's one of the areas that we were talking about the other night. How can we improve that? How can government agencies change? How can police departments change to create a better environment? So we're going to bring on Deb Fortin and Gregory Vincent, and we're going to talk about the Submarine way, and we're going to talk inclusion and leadership. Welcome, Deb and John.
Hello.
Good to be here.
Hello.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I'm outnumbered here. We got two Georgians today, right? All the way from down there. You heard the intro, I think, Deb and John. Give us a little bit of background, because the backstory of how you guys got together, certainly talking about a sub, and John, you had extraordinary career at Gallup. So people are familiar with that from a leadership perspective. Deb, you've been working with Fortune 300s, I think.
All kinds of large companies for a long time.
Yeah. So you came together, you combined several different areas of expertise and put it together in the Submarine. So whoever goes first.
It kind of starts with me, so I'm gonna go ahead and get started. Yeah. So I had been in the corporate world running P&L, sort of the traditional role in the corporate world for a long time. And, along with that, I had been doing building and evolving diversity and inclusion programs in the corporate world. Also did it as a volunteer. So I wrote for magazines and wrote articles and that type of thing. And one year, an organization came to me and asked me if I would speak at their annual conference. And I said, well, I'd be glad to do that. At the time, John was with Gallup, and he was speaking all over the world. And quite frankly, he's one of the best speakers I've ever heard. So I offered him. By the way, John is my business partner. He's also my husband. So that's
so I got that going for me.
So it was interesting. We then kind of figured out what we were going to talk about. And, I said, John, why don't you talk about your years on submarines? He'd always said that, he spent 14 years on submarines, that they were the most inclusive environments that he had ever experienced. I said, why don't you talk about that? There has to be a system. And he said, there's not a system. And I said, well, you say that an entire submarine crew turns over every 3 years, right? And he said, yeah. And I said, so there's no degradation of quality of service or the mission, right? And he said, no. And I said, well, I can tell you from my corporate background, that means there's a system. Yeah. So we talked about it, we unpacked it, and there's a 5-part system on every submarine. There's pieces of it in the Navy, but I think in the submarine, it's duplicated over and over again. And these 5 parts drive inclusion. In fact, John used to say to me, which was so intriguing for someone who, was passionate about diversity and inclusion, that the minute boots hit the steel deck, people get focused on the mission, and over time, they really learn to be a team. We coined that phrase, community, which basically is a crew on steroids, right? It's a team on steroids. And so we spoke about it.
I just want to emphasize that, Deb. It's crew-munity, right? So
yes.
community, right. It's crew-munity, right?
Crew-munity, yeah.
We were on a show not too long ago where it was crew mutiny. And we went, well, okay, that's a nice spin on it.
But that's
you don't want that.
Yeah, that sounds like Washington.
There you go. Yeah. Another topic.
So we spoke at this conference, and the reaction, there were about 300 or 400 people there, different community leaders, and the reaction was incredible. I mean, the city manager had tears in his eyes. One of the largest Baptist churches, the pastor said, how do I get this in my church? I want a more inclusive church. I want a more diverse church. How can I do this? And we got out to the car. As we're walking out to the car, people are following us out to the car. And I said to John, we have to do something about this. People are obviously hungry for a solution for us to be able to work together more effectively, to actually be productive citizens together towards a common goal. And so I started to write a book, realized that this 5-part system, along with my corporate experiences going back a long time and John's experiences on submarines, it was really a book. So I started to write the book, realized about 4 months into it that I was not meeting all the publisher's goals because I was also still in the corporate world. So I quit my job with no plan B, which I've never done before, finished the book, and it became a bestseller on Amazon almost right away. And then the phone started to ring, and communities and businesses started calling us and asking us to either speak. We did a book tour. Or they asked us if we could come out and help their organizations with this 5-part system that people were so intrigued with. And I launched the company. John was still with Gallup at the time. And I launched the company, brought in some of the people that I had known in my corporate world, corporate experiences to join me to help build it. And that was 4 years ago. And we are touching communities, universities, businesses all over the place, and really excited about the very tangible difference that we are making out there. Now, I'm going to give you an opportunity. Did I miss anything?
I get to talk?
Yes,
you do. You nailed it. I think probably it's what really caught on, and in order to get a published patent on a business model, you got to A, be unique, but B, you have to prove it actually does something. And although everyone probably says, of course we believe in equity and inclusion and diversity, the bottom line is we've been pretty lousy at changing anything. In fact, I opened that speech by simply saying everyone in this room completely believes in this, or you wouldn't be here. You wouldn't be at this annual conference on equity and inclusion. But the bottom line is here we are at the time, it was 4 or 5 years ago. 96% of Fortune 500 CEOs look like me. They're white guys. It's not working. And the reason it's not working is the way you drive change, whether it's law enforcement, universities, businesses, is you have to appeal to the bottom line. And equity and inclusion is so much more than the right thing to do. It's actually the most powerful driver of productivity when it's done properly.
So it's a business strategy.
So we approach equity and inclusion, and we always say that first because good luck recruiting a diverse population. If you don't have equity and inclusion in your organization, that's a really short-term employee because people are going to go, wow, look at the black guy. Right. So you have to address it as a business strategy, starting with equity and inclusion, driving diversity. And this is very much a business model that, yes, it's the right thing to do, but we have to approach it for what it is, which is a really, really powerful driver of KPI, which is, I think, our unique, if you will, sometimes abrasive, sometimes we scare people view.
If you're not familiar with her, and again, I've interviewed her a couple times, her name's Solange Shira. She has a company called HC Moneyball, and I've interviewed her a few times. She came from HR, but she's dyed in the wool, as she describes herself. These are her words: dyed in the wool data scientist. She's a data geek. And what she's focused on is exactly like you said, equity. When you have if you have an inclusive environment, and equity you could be inclusive and not equitable.
Yes.
So there's a difference. Yeah. So she's driven to not only have diversity, which is just meeting EEOC guidelines, it's just numbers, it's just stats, but really focus on the equity piece. And she has the data from what she's done to verify what you're talking about. That's KPI. So you can look her up. I'm happy to make an intro, but you guys definitely should follow up because she's not doing the training per se. She's setting the model in place. Yeah, there may be a good synergy there. Again, we talk about that all the time. So what are these 5 compartments? And maybe before we get there too, either one of you we throw these terms out: diversity, inclusion, and equity. In your world, how do you define the difference between those, and then kind of walk through those steps?
Yeah, diversity is the mix, and inclusion is making the mix work. I love John's definition of equity, so I'll let you define equity.
Yeah, when you look at it, what equity is we are usually talent-based. Every person brings unique talents, right? Your talents, are different than Michael's talents, different than Deb's talents, different than my talents. But if you tap into people's talents, you're really tapping into their value that they can be the best at. This is very Submarine-ish. A bunch of 20-year-olds with high school diplomas running the most sophisticated vessel ever created, including the space station. These are people that you wouldn't let do a storeroom inventory. So how does this work? It's because they tap into the talent. The other beautiful thing about talent, which is our word for equity, is talent's blind. I don't care if you're male, female, rich, poor, what your background, you went to an Ivy League school, you went to a state college. If you've got the talent to be developed into strengths that can be aimed at a role, getting things done, that is a very powerful part. Now, you take your talent and you combine it with the other 3, 4, 5 people on this call and however many people are listening or watching. Now you have inclusion. Our definition of inclusion is 2 parts. First, it has to be interdependent, and then you have to be collaborative. We always throw out the collaborative word. It's so nice. Let's be collaborative. We're collaborative, a very collaborative organization. The bottom line is human beings are not naturally collaborative. We're tribal, and especially under pressure, we the only people we'll count on ourselves, unless you show that, hey, their talent is so powerful that if it's combined with my talent, I'll be better. So once you become interdependent, you can do what we do very well in Submarines, which is work with people we can't stand. And we're doing this for months at a time, and we're never more than 10 feet apart. But how does that work? Because I need that person who has talent that I don't have, that has expertise I don't have. Once you become interdependent, then you can become collaborative. Now you're creating an inclusive environment. So that's the equity and inclusion piece, and we make sure it's always aimed at a specific result.
Right. And then the diversity is the mix. And it could be a mix of, it could be gender-based, it could be ethnicity, it could be diversity of thought. And a lot of times people don't think about that, but diversity of thought is also very important to have an effective community.
Again, in the headlines, and again, I want to bring this up because obviously doing this in business is important. Doing it in our communities is critical because there's obviously a lot of unrest that's come to light this year with social injustice. And so you're working with police departments, and they're on the hot seat. They're and it's not going to go away with the change of election. Who's ever in the office, it might have been tamped down right now, but it's going to come back. So, what's your approach? How are you going in? What are you doing differently with that?
Well, it kind of goes back to what John said a minute ago. We're teaching them to appreciate internally, because we really feel like you have to be healthy internally before you can be healthy externally. So we're teaching them to have better appreciation for each other, to have talent-based thinking in how they think. We're giving them the skills that each one of them understands that they're a leader and they have a decision to make. And if, one of the things is if they see something in their role as a police officer that isn't appropriate, it isn't right, they're a leader. They can call that out, and they should call that out. So there's some ethics training in there. There's some leadership training in there. There's the strength-based view in our training as well. And I believe that they like it because it gives them different tools to think about themselves. And then they point that towards the community. So I'll let you elaborate on that, because John works directly with our police departments.
Yeah, first of all, and this doesn't apply just to police departments, it's particularly applicable now because of the rightful pressures and microscope they're under. But nobody likes to be lectured, and nobody likes to be told, you're screwed up, shut up and do this.
Right.
It just doesn't work. The reality is there's some norms, especially in police departments, that have to be broken. And one of the norms is sort of the whole fact of holding each other accountable is sometimes looked at, and it's literally right out of the movies, almost snitching. Almost like, hey, that's not something I want to do. I don't want to be looked at as a... When you can change that mindset, that imagine all the problems you can prevent by just simply saying, hey, Bob, man, can I talk to you for a minute? Just you and Bob. No sergeant, no lieutenant, no internal affairs. And some things obviously are too big to do that with. But the vast majority, if you just start holding yourself accountable and others accountable and have this leadership mindset, you can do so much. I cannot stand... Most police departments are fine. They just have some bad apples. That's such a ridiculous... It's like saying Southwest Airlines only has a few really horrible pilots. Who would ever say that? The bottom line is that that's an excuse for addressing some of the issues. The vast majority of police are amazing people doing amazing stuff for nothing. But there are things that have become systemic. Look the other way, it's kind of how we've done things that just simply are not acceptable. Yep. And you have to present that, though, but you're talking to professionals that are open. And this is my takeaway for your audience. We don't ever come across police departments that are like, shut up, get through it, it's mandatory, and let us go back to knocking heads. They don't like to be perceived the way, in some cases, rightfully they're perceived. They want to do better, but they need guidance. And that guidance can't be a lecture, and it can't be a baseball bat, and it can't be a threat, because who the heck responds to that well? So I think it's our delivery and the fact that we're approaching them from a bit of a cerebral, but also from a very practical way on how they can be better internally. And then when they show up on a scene, they're coming with the best mindset, which is, we want this to end well for everybody. At the same time, we need to protect ourselves and other people. There's an old expression that's very true. If you're a hammer, everybody's a nail. So if you show up at somebody's house and you're expecting it to go badly, it's going to end badly. If you show up with the mindset, how do we make sure this ends best for all, including the safety of the officers, you tend to have very different outcomes. First, you change mindset, then you change behavior. It works quite well.
What's the go ahead.
Tools that they can use in difficult situations, that they can call on those tools.
Okay. So obviously, the police departments, the police forces don't live on an island. I mean, they're in the communities, and they're going to be tested as well. So going into these communities, working with the police departments as you have, what's that look like? I mean, what is it? It's obviously not going in, hey, we're going to have D&I day, and you'll get, as you said, your check mark. It's got to be a process. It's got to be ongoing. Just give a hint. We have about 5 minutes here or so, but what's the kind of start? What if somebody says, we're interested, but how do we get involved? How long is it going to take? What's it look like?
Yep.
So it could be anywhere from a 6-month program to a year program. It really depends on the amount of time that they have to spend on it. And like we said, we work first internally so that they begin to have the tools to hold each other accountable, to have really healthy conversations. We don't shy away from conflict. We think, in fact, one of our courses is called Positive Conflict, because unless you're willing to have those tough conversations, then you're not really willing to hold each other accountable. So that first starts internally, giving them the language, the tools, the okay to really have those conversations internally, and then it gets pointed at the community. And a lot of times, for example, one of the police departments we work with, we're actually also working with and coaching the diversity inclusion officer from that community. So we're putting the community and the community leaders along with the police department together and having them work with the community. A lot of what happened a number of years ago is that the investment in police officers being actually out in the community and walking around and getting to know people, that investment got taken away through no fault of their own. That's an important investment because even in terms of solving crimes, you can solve a crime with intel from the community, but you have to be close enough to the community to get that intel. And so, that's really how it works. Internally first, learning how to communicate, have healthy conflict, and then working with the other leaders like the diversity and inclusion officers from the city, and then pointing that towards the community and reestablishing those relationships with the community. In fact, we are working on a coalition of leaders where we're building specifically a neighborhood policing series of courses. And these are, former mayors, they're, people who are police officers, New York City police officer who worked with Governor Cuomo on some work that he needed done. So these are really talented people who have experience, and we're working on building a series of courses that really help train the police to be more effective in the community. But quite frankly, we're giving them the tools to be effective in the community if they will make sure that they invest in that and they spend the time in the community, because that's critical, obviously. But we also work with businesses in the same way, very, very similar approach. I think police officers have a unique challenge, and so we're able to specifically address that unique challenge. But it's extremely rewarding. Everything we're doing, whether it's a business or whether it's a community, it's very, very rewarding to walk away and know that you've made such a huge difference. People have a different language, they have a different way of looking at the situation.
Yeah, I mean, the bottom line becomes much bigger. I mean, when we're talking about the bottom line of a police department, it's not literally that they made the budget, but it's that it's much safer, healthier, more positive, and the collateral impact of that is downstream is just tremendous, and we really need that. So you're doing a great mission there. How do people get a hold of you? You got 2 books, The Submarine Way, up Periscope. Obviously, you go to Amazon, learn a little bit more about you. I assume that's the best place to go is up on Amazon.
We are the easiest people in the world to find.
Yeah, we wouldn't be good in the witness protection program.
So you can Google The Submarine Way, and you can find out all about us as individuals. You can Google our names. You can find our books. You can either buy them from the website, and they're a little bit less expensive on the website if you want to buy them on the website.
They're also autographed.
If you have a trusted relationship with Amazon, buy them on Amazon. Yeah. You can do that too. Or you talked about Barnes & Noble earlier. You can get them anywhere. You can even get them internationally. They're available. We have a pretty large audience internationally. So we're very, very easy to find. If you go out to our website, there's contact me buttons all over the place. And that goes directly to our calendar, and you can set up a time on our calendar with us. So we would love that.
Pretty much the Submarine Way is everywhere. The YouTube channel is called The Submarine Way. The Vimeo channel, The Submarine Way. The LinkedIn company page, The Submarine Way. The website, The Submarine Way. If you can figure out the .com part, you can pretty much find us. But those are our two books. Diversity and Inclusion, The Submarine Way was the one that started the company. And then Up Periscope,
putting traditional leadership in the crosshairs.
Is our clients actually, our partners, our clients actually asked for that book. They wanted a distilled manual of leadership based on our principles, because it's not leadership or inclusion, it's leadership through inclusion. That's the most effective way for a company or a municipality or anyone else to approach these topics. You don't separate them. They're one and the same.
Well, I hope a lot of people are listening to this message. We really need it. I mean, not only in corporations and business, because we're doing a horrible job there, but obviously it would be great to have our police on the right, not that they're not on the right side, but that we have a higher esteem for them. And that we're at this tipping point, maybe a reckoning day. And again, powerful message, powerful solution. Wish you guys the best of luck for our sake. I hope that message, you're incredibly busy and go out and can help save the world.
Absolutely.
So, we appreciate you, appreciate Michael. We appreciate you having us on. And I'd like to wish all my fellow veterans Happy Veterans Day. Thank you for what you do. Everyone is done.
Okay. Hey, thanks very much, guys. We'll be talking to you soon. We are going to take a quick break, as we usually do. We'll be back in about 2 minutes. You're listening to the Geeks, Geezers, and Googleization show. And on the flip side of this, we're going to bring on Joyce Gioia from the Herman Group. And we're going to be talking about Ahead of the Curve, Normal 2.0, and ties in today's topic, empathy in the Normal 2.0.
Very timely. Very timely.
Very much so. So we will be right back. Hiring top talent shouldn't be left up to the roll of the dice. And yet, that's exactly what many organizations do. They roll the dice, cross their fingers, and pray for a better outcome. Hiring the right employees the first time is much too important and way too costly to leave to a game of chance. Your employees and your customers deserve better. For 25 years, Success Performance Solution has been helping small and medium-sized businesses hire smarter. They offer pre-employment and leadership assessments from typing and data entry to C-suite competence. Whether it's production, sales, healthcare, call centers, or management, Success Performance Solutions can help. Visit their website at www.successperformancesolutions.com to schedule a free demo or call 800-803-4303.
A lot of you might be feeling like you're standing in deep shift. But do you know what grows and rises out of deep shift? Opportunity. To successfully navigate the shift to the new normal, each of us must learn to rapidly adapt to the speed of change. Some of us are hardwired for this. Others, not so much. That's where Success Performance Solutions can help. Success Performance Solutions is now your AQ headquarters. Whether you are personally struggling with the next chapter in your career or wondering how ready your team is for fast, disruptive change, our AQ assessment and coaching will provide you a detailed, scientifically backed roadmap to guide you into the new normal. Optimize your adaptability today. Contact Success Performance Solutions about evaluating your team's change readiness or joining our upcoming AQ Masterclass. Visit successperformancesolutions.com or call us at 800-803-4303.
We are back, Skeezers and Googleization. I'm Ira Wolf, your host, and my guest co-host is Mike Strimulli, and we will be joined in just a second with Joyce Gioia. There she is.
There she is.
Great to see you again.
Yeah, absolutely.
Michael and Ira.
Yeah, I know.
Joyce, I got to say, before Ira gets going here, I subscribed to your trend report last week. That's gold. Anyone who is wanting to literally stay ahead of the curve, they need to get that. Lots of great information in there. So I just wanted to mention that to you.
Thank you, Michael. I work very hard every week to make sure that I have really good quality and helpful information.
Well, not only is the quality good and succinct and to the point, it's stuff that I haven't seen floating around out there. So it's obvious that you're being proactive in finding this information and compiling it as opposed to just, taking a feed from someplace. So very, very solid and useful information. So just wanted to mention that to you.
Thank you. As a futurist, I scan a lot of publications every week looking for the trends. Yes, Ira.
Yeah, and just to let everybody know, I mean, it's not just HR. We live in this world, and that's a lot of our target. But you're talking about business trends. I don't know what this week's issue is, but I know you've talked about like hotels and travel and transportation, what that's going to look like. Obviously, it affects HR, but it's not specifically just HR topics. So
yes, I like to say I enjoy playing in a lot of sandboxes.
You do. You do.
I have a very low threshold of boredom, and it's one of the ways that I handle that.
That's probably why we've been friends for 20 years, something like that.
Probably so, my friend. Probably
so you're in the background. I get your chats. I appreciate the commentary back and forth while we've got our other guest on. Certainly in need. Love their approach. High in need. And again, we're going to be talking, we talked about leadership last week. We're talking about empathy this week. Maybe one of the future ones will be diversity 2.0 or inclusion 2.0.
For sure. And I think that what Deb and Michael, it is Michael, I think, what John talk about is so important. I mean, those guys are right on with what they're talking about. And it's interesting that years ago, my late partner and I, Roger Herman, did a study for the Department of Education, and DOE at the Office of Vocational and Experiential Education wanted to know why the military is so much more effective in holding on to its young adults than the community colleges. Because, of course, whatever it was that they were doing, they wanted to pick up and do, give to the community colleges. Well, it was a 54-page report, very extensive. We went to Washington, did our dog and pony show, and they said, thank you very much. We're concentrating on literacy right now, or No Child Left Behind, or whatever it was, but not on what we had just done. But what we learned was that teamwork is so important. The idea of no teammate left behind, of all for one and one for all, which is part of, by the way, being an employer of choice, part of the book that I wrote, How to Become an Employer of Choice. But anyway, we're digressing, and I'd really like to talk about empathy a little bit. May I have your permission?
That way, because again, with teamwork, I'm not sure how you have successful teamwork without empathy. I mean, just because you get along or you suppress conflict, just because it looks good on the surface doesn't mean that you've achieved that level of empathy that we need today.
Yeah, there have been times when I've struggled with people who were supposed to be my leaders, and instead they were managing me, and it was because of a lack of empathy. They didn't realize what was going on with me. We define empathy as the ability to understand and share the feelings of another. And clearly, those managers, not leaders, and I believe we manage things and lead people, were not able to find the empathy that I needed to be good leaders for me. But yesterday, I was in a marketing conference. And what they talked about was how important empathy is, that it's really critical for marketers in these days and times. So this is a concept that I'm seeing as a leitmotif through all kinds of areas of business, not just HR and leadership, but all kinds of areas of business. And I want to share that I got turned on to the little book that I used as kind of a model for this particular Herman Trend Alert by a mutual friend of ours, Jennifer Leake.
Right.
And Jennifer said there's a little book from the Harvard Business Review called Empathy. And I ordered it immediately. And I was just fascinated by it because in it, Daniel Goleman talks about, and by the way, he's the father of emotional intelligence. He talks about the fact that we have 3 kinds of empathy. And I thought that that was fascinating because I always thought that empathy was empathy. But he said that we have cognitive empathy, which is our ability to see the world through another person's eyes. Emotional empathy, which is the ability to actually feel what someone else feels. And I guess that's how I had in the past defined empathy. And then finally, empathetic concern, which Goleman defined as the ability to sense what someone else needs from you. I mean, it's like sometimes you and I will be talking and I'll open my mouth to say something and you'll answer my question before I have asked it. And that's because I always thought that we were in sync, but it's because there's an empathetic concern that you have for me that allows us to work so well together.
So the 3, I guess the word that's going through my head, and I guess this is where it gets soft or not, is compassion. So where does it cross the line between standing in somebody else's shoes?
Yeah, very interesting. How does compassion relate with empathy, right? Mm-hmm. So one of the articles in this neat little book, which you can pick up on Amazon for not very much money, is an article by the Dalai Lama. And he talks about, he believes that compassion actually takes empathy to the next level. And I once had a spiritual teacher, and I asked him, what was the most important thing about being a human being on this planet? And he said, having compassion. And to have seen the Dalai Lama's words kind of echoed from so many years ago was just a fascinating experience for me. What the Dalai Lama said is that it has a hugely positive effect, that empathy has a quote unquote hugely positive effect on the relationships that we have in the workplace. And of course, we would agree. And also, he also mentioned that the absence of compassion leads to dysfunction and discord and conflict and all of those things that we don't want in our workplace, of course.
So we can launch into a Washington tirade, right?
Oh, I don't want to go there.
Yeah,
I don't want to go there.
You mentioned earlier about how you were surprised with marketing. And you would think, I mean, because ultimately that's what marketing was, especially through visuals and ads, is trying to walk in somebody else's shoes. So the very base level of empathy. But a friend of mine,
I just want to say something really quickly. Interestingly enough, before I got into HR, I was in marketing, and I was an award-winning copywriter, actually. And the way that I write copy is I imagine my audience and I look out through their eyes. Mm-hmm. So that's exactly what you're talking about. Now, tell me about your friend.
Yeah, so her name's Debbie Levitt. For those of you who have heard me speak or seen, the presentation, your candidate experience is all FCD'd up, all F'd up, which stands for frustration, confusion, disappointment, and distraction. It was, these are the issues that the emotions other people feel when they go through a user experience, especially with technology. But she wrote a book, and part of that, it's called Delta CX. You can get that up online.
Sure.
CX is customer experience. But she has a whole chapter in there. She interviewed a psychologist friend of her, and it was about empathy. And that was the first time that was injected into it. And so even if marketers get it, and then they go to the people who design the website, they design the experience. If there's no empathy, because it was ones and zeros that they put together, and somebody comes with this concept and they understood it. And then it goes back to ones and zeros. And there was no empathy. There, it was always frustration, confusing, distracting, and disappointing, the whole experience. So, so it is absolutely getting embedded further down. And I know she and I have talked even about how do you hire UX people, user experience designers, that have empathy. And that's not how they were brought up. That's not how they were trained.
Yeah, clearly. And if they're data people, even less, right?
Yeah, for sure.
But it's really important to have empathy, no matter who you are or what you do, even if it's a matter of relating with your family, right? Mm-hmm. You want to be able to...
You need to be with family.
Yeah, especially, right? And there are times when that's hard, because the time that people typically need love most from us is the time that people are feeling the most unlovable. And that's when we need to have the greatest amount of compassion and empathy.
So, Joyce, what's online for next week?
Oh, next week we're going to do hotel hacks in Normal 2.0.
That'll be interesting.
Because I look forward to that if I ever see the inside of a hotel again.
Well, you know what's interesting? I wrote it from the hotel point of view, but when I come here next week, I'm going to address it also from the consumer point of view, because my husband and I demanded it, silly me, went on an adventure, and we drove for 6 hours from Austin up to a place called Quanah, Texas, to go see the Perseid meteor shower. And we stayed in a hotel overnight, and we went to the park to go see the Perseid meteor shower, and it was totally overcast. But the experience of taking that car trip, the experience of going on airplanes, and I have a lot of experience going on airplanes, and I can tell you how I'm going to operate differently in December when I'm going to Mazatlan, because I'm flying to Mazatlan, and it's not going to be the same experience that I've had in the past when I rode on airplanes. But there are some things that you can do if you're planning to stay at a hotel, depending on the length of time you're staying, to prepare. And I'm going to do some extra preparation that was not in my Herman Trend Alert that I'm going to be sharing with everybody next week.
Okay. And next week's segment, we got a real rock star coming on. I don't know if you're familiar with them, Joyce, but Torrin Ellis, you know Torrin Ellis. He actually has a show on Sirius XM. He's one of the top keynoters. Passion. I mean, we talk about inclusion, diversity. He's a straight shooter. He doesn't hold back. He's going to be our guest next week as well. And so that'll be a great tie-in and a follow-up to what we talked about this week with Deb and John.
Sure.
About the submarine way. So again, we are. The time just goes crazy fast, especially.
It does. It just flies by.
Fastest hour of my week, really. It just buzzes.
I like it. I mean, we cover a lot, and we give people a taste, and then they'll keep coming back. Right? That's good marketing.
Hopefully, if people want to sign up for my Herman Trend Alert, they can go to www.hermantrendalerts.com.
And as Greg said, please do. So.
And while they're there, if they want to reach me, they can always click on Contact Us and get to me.
Very much. You are listening again to the Geeks, Geezers, and Googlization show. Another great show. We talked about inclusion, empathy, and next week we're going to be talking about more inclusion with Torrin Ellis. And we're going to be talking about hotel hacks. Hopefully, people will be able to get back there and learn how to plan, because it's going to take definitely more planning. Thank you, Googlization Nation, for listening. Thank you for sharing that, letting other people know. Please subscribe up on our podcast. We're on Apple, Spotify, iHeart. We're now on Amazon. You name it, we're there. You can subscribe to our newsletter at googlizationnation.com. And until next week, don't let the shift hit your plans.